Yeah, so thank you so much for joining today's Critical Issues Forum speakers series. This is the second time, and good evening, good morning, and good afternoon, depending on where you are. And my name is Masako Toki, a Senior Project Manager at the James Martin Center for Nonproliferation Studies in Monterey, California. And I really appreciate you make time to join today's event. And I am super excited about today's special event with the United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs, UNODA, featuring the Youth Champions for Disarmament. And I'd like to thank the UNODA for your continuing amazing work for disarmament and your support and cooperation for our Center for Disarmament and Nonproliferation Education, especially for young generations. I would also like to express my sincere appreciation to the funders of the CIF project, the Tom and Sarah Pattison Fund and the Saga Foundation. And I know Sarah is here with us today, and thank you so much for your continuing support. So we have a very exciting agenda today. We are delighted to have two of CIF alumni to share their experience, their disarmament activities, and their visions for the future. And we are thrilled to learn about the role of the United Nations for a world free of nuclear weapons and its youth engagement. Then we will have a panel discussion with three of the youth champions for disarmament. We will save some time for a question and answer session. The timing of today's meeting cannot be more appropriate. The Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, or TPNW, also more commonly known as the Nuclear Ban Treaty, just entered into force last week on January 22nd. And the United Nations just celebrated the 75th anniversary of its first UN General Assembly resolution that promotes disarmament. Commemorating these historic milestones in disarmament efforts, past and present. And looking toward the future, we cannot emphasize enough the important role young people can play toward a world free of nuclear weapons. Today, we have high school students, educators, and friends from around the world, including the United States, Japan, and Russia. We have many new friends who joined today's event. So I would like to just very briefly introduce the Critical Issues Forum to you. This speaker series is a part of our outreach efforts of the Critical Issues Forum project to promote disarmament and non-proliferation education to young generations, especially high school students. CIF is one of the flagship education projects at CNS. CNS launched the CIF project in 1997, aiming to develop these young generations' critical thinking skills through non-proliferation and disarmament education for a safer and more peaceful future. CIF also promotes cross-cultural understanding and communication among participants. The current global pandemic has taught us the importance of international cooperation in order to reduce nuclear threats. We believe that young people, such as high school students, have an important role to play for the goal. Despite the global pandemic situation that requires us to conduct all the project activities virtually, we have not let it impede our efforts in promoting disarmament and non-proliferation education. Each year, we select a timely topic related to nuclear disarmament. This year's topic is Toward a World Free of Nuclear Weapons, the role of youth as change agents in the age of global crisis. These are some photos from recent spring conferences. In normal years, the CIF project conducts an in-person students conference in Monterey, California, where our school is located. In the past, we also had a conference in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan and Vienna, Austria. Students present their semester-long studies at the spring conference. We have invited amazing guest speakers for the student conference who are passionate about youth engagement, such as Dr. William Perry, former U.S. Secretary of Defense, and Dr. Lassina Zerbo, Executive Secretary of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization. So if you are high school teachers or students and interested in learning more about the Critical Issues Forum or interested in joining the program, please reach out to me. You can find the information about the CIF on our website, and please follow us on the social media. Thank you very much for your attention. So now let me stop share. And I would like to call my colleague Jean Dupree. Is he here?
I am here.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jean. So let me introduce Mr. Jean Dupree, who is going to give welcome remarks. Mr. Jean Dupree is a senior program manager for education and training at CNS, and he has extensive experience in diplomacy, international peace and security, disarmament and nonproliferation, and of course, education and training. So Jean, I'm going to give you a microphone, so take it away.
Thank you, Masako, and good afternoon, good evening, I guess even good morning at some places. You are looking wonderful. I'm looking at 2 screens filled with faces, and I see a few older faces like mine, but mostly I see young smiling faces. This is great. So welcome to this wonderful event. Thank you, Masako, for putting this together, and also thank you to our wonderful colleagues and partners at the United Nations for their efforts in this regard. You know, the United Nations is a leading agent in this field. I'll come back to that in a moment. I also want to recognize Mrs. Sarah Patterson. I saw her earlier in here. There's Sarah and Tom. These 2 people are, but make all of this possible. They have been supporting this program for many years. They're passionate about it. They live not far from us in Davis, California. And without them, we would not be able to do so. So, Sarah and Tom, hi. Nice to see you. Okay. You know, at the Middlebury Institute of International Studies, we pride ourselves to train the next generation of policy experts in international relations, development, environment, human rights in a cross-cultural, multilingual environment. The Center for Nonproliferation Studies is the world's largest non-governmental organization that focuses not only on education in the field of nonproliferation and disarmament, but also research and analysis. We offer a wide range of programs, including a very unique master's degree in nonproliferation and terrorism studies. And we train the next generation of experts through practical ways, including through internships at international organizations. Many of our students, and I've been many, work for international governments, national governments, international organizations, and think tanks. We also offer a range of professional education for diplomats and other professionals in the field. And we have offices here in Monterey, in Vienna, Austria, and in Washington, D.C. But I have to say that, in my opinion, the Critical Issues Forum is one of our flagship programs. And I'm not saying this because we've invited you to, and we've taken part in this event. High school students is really the next generation. And the teachers amongst you, you are really the people that are mentoring and shaping the next generation. And so we are so proud of you in helping us to do so. The name Critical Issues Forum is aptly describing what its mission is: to promote critical thinking skills among high school students from around the world, and to erode nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction until they are ultimately eliminated. Over the years, we have had many impressive students that has completed this program, and soon you'll hear from 2 of them. And I'm very pleased to open this event, which is aimed not only at honoring the youth champions for disarmament, but also the role of the United Nations in creating a world free of nuclear weapons 75 years after the first nuclear weapons were used. As you know, the Charter of the United Nations starts with these solemn words: we the peoples of the United Nations, determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, which twice in our lifetime has brought untold sorrows to mankind. Those words and the rest of the Charter were written before the world knew what nuclear weapons were. Had the drafters of the Charter known about the destructive power of nuclear weapons, and that a nuclear war would destroy succeeding generations, I believe the Charter would have started much differently. This is why it's so crucially important for your generation to act as agents and as change agents with the goal of saving succeeding generations from the scourge of nuclear war, a war that cannot be won. So I challenge you as youth champions to use the skills of your generation and your passion to make a difference by mobilizing not only your own generation, but your parents and your grandparents, your teachers, your friends, their parents and their grandparents, and most importantly, politicians, to act now and take part in worldwide efforts to rid the world of nuclear weapons in your lifetime. If you can do this, then you are not only youth champions, but champions of the world. Thank you and good luck.
Thank you so much, Jean. That was so inspiring welcome remarks. Thank you. So now I would like to move to the CIF alumni experience segment. So over the years, the CIF program has provided high school students with unique and invaluable experiences through disarmament and non-proliferation education and cross-cultural exchanges. So today, we are so happy to have two of the alumni, one from Japan, one from the United States. And they are going to share their experience with the CIF, the impact on their career or studies, and their current activities and their visions for the future. So first, I would like to introduce Suzuka Nakamura. She's a student at the Sophia University in Tokyo, and she participated in the Critical Issues Forum in 2018 from Kasui High School in Nagasaki. So Suzuka, I'm going to give you the floor, so take it away.
Okay, thank you, Toki-sensei. Hi, good evening and good morning. I'm Suzuka Nakamura from Japan, Nagasaki. First of all, thank you so much for giving me such an honorable and lovely chance to talk about my experience and see all of you on the screen. I'm very happy today. Yes, and I would like to congratulate that the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapon finally entering into force. Like, I guess many of members here had a very busy weekend last week to celebrate this treaty. I also had a bit busy few days, but about me, I was born and raised in Nagasaki, and my grandmother is a victim of the atomic bomb, hibakusha. So I'm going to be the third generation of hibakusha. And I started this kind of activity since I entered the high school. And you know, I see Kusano sensei today. I'm so happy to see him. I guess he is joining this forum from one of the room in my high school. So he was the teacher who taught me a lot about this peace activity. And after doing, so I joined the CIF in 2018 with him. I can say, I'm sure that the experience of my CIF experience are so special and so special for me because the experience I had there was everything I see and everything I touch, everything I hear was everything was new. You know, knowing outside of Japan and knowing outside of Nagasaki was very first time for me. So first I thought it would be a little difficult to talk with American and Russian students because both country had a nuclear weapon, and I didn't have any knowledge about outside of Nagasaki, so I thought there would be a big difference between us. But that was not true at all. Like having conversation and knowing each other, I know that those students who joined the CIF also had a passion and eagerness to abolish nuclear weapon, and like knowing that we all sharing the same goal, I was so encouraged. And like, you know, that experience still encouraged me a lot. And now I'm being able to continue this activity, even if I enter the university. Yeah, and now I entered the university in Tokyo. So I'm basically doing this activity in Tokyo. But yeah, from now, I would like to talk about my activity I'm doing right now. So as you guys already know, TPNW finally entered into force, but Japan still didn't join to this treaty. And that's so annoying thing for me. I really want that Japanese government to join this treaty as soon as possible. So I thought that to change the situation, I need to make an action focusing on the politics. So I started to ask each politicians to ask what do you think about the treaty. So from here, so I'm doing the name of the activity I'm doing now is called Giin Watch. Maybe translating in English, it's gonna be watching politicians, I guess. So I am asking each politicians about, do you agree or disagree to the treaty, so that the citizens, we can see how they are thinking. Yeah, and from last December, I started to meet them directly and talk about the treaty. You know, most of the politicians say that because Japan is being safe under the nuclear umbrella of America, so it's not the timing, or we can't join the treaty, or you know, this treaty is dividing the states to nuclear weapon states and non-nuclear weapon states. So it's not a proper step to abolish nuclear weapon. But you know, then how are you going to abolish nuclear weapon? And when I ask them how, and please let me know about your step to abolish nuclear weapon, then they would, most of them would say, that's a very difficult question. Let me think about it more. And they do not have the correct answer still. So I would, you know, in Japan, it is not still really popular to have a communication with politicians as well. So it's a very, I know that I'm doing a very difficult thing right now, but in order to change this situation, I would like to continue approaching to the politicians, and I want let them to know that the TPNW is the only way to step forward to the abolish nuclear weapons. Yeah, so sorry. I didn't have I didn't have chance to talk in English for quite a long time, so I was a bit nervous today, but I wish everyone could understand what I'm talking. And please contact me. Do not hesitate to ask me if you have any questions, and I would love to be in touch with you. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Suzuka-chan. I must tell you that you are on the Japanese media everywhere recently because of her very active engagement in supporting TPNW. So if you can speak Japanese, or if you just Google her name, her face is pops up. So thank you so much. So now I would like to ask Ariel Orlando to share her experience. She's a student at Middlebury College, and she joined the CIF in 2016 in Monterey, California. So Ariel, I'm going to give you the microphone. So take it away, Ariel.
Thanks, Moscow, and thank you so much for this amazing opportunity. And I also wanted to thank Suzuka. It sounds like you're doing really amazing work. So thank you for putting in all that time. And thank you all, everyone here, for putting in the time on this really important issue. So as Masako was saying, I'm a student at Middlebury College, where I'm a senior, and that's where I study environmental justice and computer science, which doesn't exactly seem related to nonproliferation, but trust me, it is. And so I first became involved in nonproliferation when I was 16 in my junior year of high school at Choate Rosemary Hall. And students there participated in the Critical Issues Forum every year. And some of my role models that were older than me at school had participated in the years before me. And so when I had the opportunity, I applied to go as my school's representative in 2016. And so I worked with Mr. Davidson, huge shout out to him as well, he's here, and spent about a semester or two studying nonproliferation. But at the same time, I was also in an environmental immersion program at my school. So while I was studying nonproliferation in my free time, I was also studying subjects like ecology and environmental ethics and environmental policy. So my interests in nonproliferation and the environment have always kind of intersected together. So my time at CIF in 2016 was absolutely amazing. It was the first time I was really able to meet and talk to other young people that were just as passionate about disarmament as I was. And I made lifelong friends there as well, which I didn't expect from an event that was only a couple of days. But I'm still in contact with many of my peers. And it's just amazing to kind of be friends with people from not only the US, but Russia and Japan, who are passionate about the same issues that I am, no matter how far away we are geographically. So at the end of that CIF conference in 2016, I was designated a youth communicator for a world without nuclear weapons by the Japanese government. So in the next few months, I continued to keep up with nuclear issues. And then next year, I was ecstatic. I received an invitation to travel to Nagasaki, Japan, and again have the amazing opportunity to work with other youth towards disarmament. And part of that was this immense honor of hearing the story of a hibakusha, a survivor of nuclear weapons. And I think hearing that story really changed my life and really put everything that we were doing into perspective, because it showed the real human risk that was involved and why it was so important for us to pursue disarmament as young people. So fast forward a couple of years, I'm a sophomore at Middlebury College. I'm primarily studying environmental sciences, but nonproliferation is always in the back of my mind as an interest in a kind of passion project. And then I saw the opportunity to spend my summer at the Center for Nonproliferation Studies, a chance for me to work with Masako again, but also to circle back to nonproliferation and again work with young people who were just as passionate about it as I was. And some of those people were Grace Kyer and Sam Barnes, and we created a podcast called Big Nuke Energy. And we started the podcast because we were noticing all of these amazing women at CNS and in the nonproliferation field and the work that they did. But we weren't seeing that same kind of representation higher up in the field. And so we wanted to create a platform where young women working in nonproliferation could share what they're doing and kind of broadcast those voices to the world. So now, a year and a half later, we have 37 episodes. And each episode, we've interviewed a different amazing woman who works in nonproliferation, which I think just shows how many of us there are out there. And we also cover current nonproliferation events in an accessible way. We call it Toes in the Heavy Water. We like our puns at the podcast. And we also have a proliferation patriarchy section where we share tips for smashing the patriarchy. So we're really trying to engage a broad audience of people who are just non-pro fans. They've done it their whole lives, but also the general public. And in addition to the podcast, my senior thesis that I'm currently working on focuses on the effects of nuclear testing in indigenous communities in Nevada and in the Marshall Islands, and specifically the implications that has for how power operates and how injustice operates within the US system. So I kind of took that inspiration I had from the hibakusha when I was in Nagasaki, and now I'm applying that and looking at survivors of nuclear weapons testing here in the US. So the future, well, I don't know what's going to happen. I think the pandemic has shown us that things are crazy, but also that the youth and we all are incredibly resilient as well. And I think we can continue to get new communities involved in disarmament and also discuss how it intersects with larger issues such as climate change as well. And the podcast has also taught me how creative other young people are in engaging people in nonproliferation. There are so many fantastic ideas out there in organizations such as Girl Security, for example. There's even a Twitter meme account that only makes nuclear-related memes. And so I think young people will constantly surprise us. And I think the future is bright for disarmament.
Great. Thank you so much, Ariel. It's so encouraging. And if you haven't, today's audience haven't listened to their podcast, The Big Nuke Energy, I strongly encourage you to listen to it. It's great. So it's really one of the best podcasts that I listened. So thank you, Ariel. That was great. So now I would like to move to the next segment, and we are so thrilled to hear from the two of the United Nations ODA experts, and they will discuss the role of the United Nations in creating a world free of nuclear weapons. First speaker is Ms. Claudia Garcia, Political Affairs Officer at the Weapons of Mass Destruction Branch, the UN Office for Disarmament Affairs. Ms. Garcia will talk about 75 years of international efforts to achieve nuclear disarmament. So Ms. Garcia, so I'm going to give you the microphone. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Masako. I would like to extend my thanks for the invitation to take part in this virtual forum. And I'm so encouraged for all your efforts and hard work. It is really inspiring. The United Nations has sought the total elimination of nuclear weapons and all other weapons of mass destruction since its establishment. This was the objective of the first resolution adopted by the UN General Assembly on 24 January 1946. Yet, 75 years later, the goal of a world free of nuclear weapons remains more relevant than ever. Nuclear weapons remain the most destructive weapons invented and pose an existential threat to the planet. Any use of nuclear weapons would also precipitate a humanitarian catastrophe, as no country has the capacity to adequately respond to their use. Relationships between states possessing nuclear weapons are characterized by division, distrust, and an absence of dialogue. As they increasingly choose to pursue strategic competition over cooperation, the dangers posed by nuclear weapons are becoming more acute. For these reasons, the Secretary General has underscored that the pursuit of nuclear disarmament is the United Nations' highest disarmament priority. Since the creation of the United Nations, a number of multilateral treaties have been negotiated with the aim of preventing nuclear proliferation and testing, while promoting progress in nuclear disarmament. These multilateral disarmament treaties are complemented by bilateral and plurilateral treaties that seek to reduce or eliminate certain categories of nuclear weapons, to prevent the proliferation of such weapons and their delivery vehicles. In this presentation, I would like to focus on 3 multilateral disarmament treaties: the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, the NPT, the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, CTBT, and of course, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, the TPNW. As you may know, the NPT is the cornerstone of the global nuclear non-proliferation regime and an essential foundation for the pursuit of nuclear disarmament. The NPT entered into force in 1970 and is one of the world's most widely adhered to treaties with 199 state parties. The NPT is built upon 3 pillars: nuclear non-proliferation, nuclear disarmament, and the peaceful use of nuclear energy. The NPT is an essential pillar of the international peace and security architecture due to its legally binding disarmament commitments, verifiable non-proliferation obligations, and near universal status, which means that the vast majority of countries are bound by those commitments and obligations. While the NPT has been relatively successful in fulfilling its non-proliferation mission and facilitating the peaceful uses of nuclear energy, non-nuclear weapon states parties to the treaty have long expressed that the nuclear weapon states have not fulfilled their disarmament obligations under Article 6 of the treaty. The Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, CTBT, which bans all nuclear explosions, is at the core of efforts to end nuclear testing. The CTBT opened for signature on 24 September 1996, but despite its widespread support, it has not entered into force, meaning it does not yet have legal force and effect, despite the fact that 968 countries have joined it. The norm against testing is another example of a measure that serves both disarmament and non-proliferation objectives. It is one of the greatest accomplishments of the post-Cold War era, but it cannot be taken for granted. In the current security environment, we need to redouble our efforts to uphold this norm. The voluntary moratoria imposed by most nuclear-armed states is welcome, but it's not a substitute for a verifiable, legally binding prohibition. The CTBT put a brake on the arms race by constraining the development of advanced new types of nuclear weapons. It also serves as a powerful normative barrier against potential states that might seek to develop, manufacture, and subsequently acquire nuclear weapons in violation of their non-proliferation commitments. The Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, TPNW, reflects a repudiation of the unacceptable and growing dangers of nuclear weapons, as well as legitimate concerns about the humanitarian and environmental consequences of any use of such weapons. As mentioned previously, the TPNW entered into force on 22nd January 2021, becoming the first multilateral nuclear disarmament treaty in more than 2 decades. As of 27 January 2021, the TPNW has 52 states party. The TPNW contains a comprehensive set of prohibitions on participating in any nuclear weapon-related activities. This includes undertakings not to develop, test, produce, acquire, possess, stockpile, use, or threaten to use nuclear weapons. Many TPNW proponents argue that the TPNW would contribute to the stigmatization of the possession of nuclear weapons. Therefore, the treaty is not an end unto itself, but rather one more tool in the global regime that seeks the total elimination of nuclear weapons. In response to the deteriorating international security environment and the erosion of international arms control, the Secretary General launched his disarmament agenda, Securing Our Common Future, in May 2018. In his agenda, the Secretary General called for resuming dialogue and negotiations for nuclear arms control and disarmament. He supports extending the norms against nuclear weapons and appeals to states that possess them to affirm that a nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought. The agenda also proposes preparing for a world free of nuclear weapons through a number of risk reduction measures. Despite all these efforts, we have still a way to go. We are convinced that young people like you can make substantive contributions to facilitating progress in disarmament and non-proliferation, and can help raise awareness and promote change for a more peaceful and secure world. To conclude, let me echo the Secretary General's message on the International Youth Day on 12 August 2020. The voices and activists of young people are making a difference and moving our world closer to the values and vision of the United Nations Charter. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Claudia. It's so inspiring, and thank you for sharing the important initiative taken by the United Nations for disarmament. I really appreciate it. So now I would like to introduce Mrs. Soo-Hyun Kim. She's the United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs Youth Focal Point, and she's going to discuss the importance of the youth engagement and the Youth for Disarmament initiative. So Sue, the microphone is yours. Take it away.
Thank you, Masako. Hello, everyone. It's great to see everyone today. And Suzuka-san and also Ariel, thank you for sharing your experiences. It was like music to my ears. Before I talk about Youth for Disarmament initiative, let me just share quickly with you 2-minute short video clip made by our office. It's for educators and also for students. So let me just share the screen.
Throughout history, countries have pursued disarmament to stop arms races, build trust, and protect people from harm. Disarmament has been central to the work of the United Nations since its founding, and it is critical for building a more secure and peaceful world. But what actually is disarmament? For the United Nations, this means 1. The elimination of weapons of mass destruction. 2. The regulation of conventional weapons and balanced reduction of armed forces. And 3. Making sure that new technologies are used in line with international norms. So why does disarmament matter? Access to weapons doesn't necessarily cause conflict, but it can encourage, intensify, and prolong it. Disarmament and arms control play a critical role in preventing and ending crises and armed conflict. Disarmament can also reduce an immense financial burden on societies. In 2019 alone, world military spending was $1.917 trillion, the highest since the Cold War. That's about $250 for every single person in the world, and over 12 times what the wealthy world spends on aid. The cost of a single stealth fighter is enough to put 200,000 children through a year of school. The cost of one battle tank is enough to treat 26,000 people for malaria. And this isn't counting the cost of what is destroyed and the lives lost and ruined because of conflicts. The world is overarmed and peace is underfunded. Sustainable development can only happen in a safe and secure environment. And we need disarmament to help provide that.
Thank you. I hope you were able to watch it. Did it work? Okay. Okay. So this was actually world premiere. So this is one of the efforts that our office does. We take disarmament also to the educators so that educators can take this important information to their classrooms. So sometimes disarmament issues could seem to be a very technical kind of issues, but we would try to help the educators as well as bring disarmament to youth. So let me quickly, okay, go back to my presentation. Right. So can you hear me well? Okay. All right. So, as the world population, 1.8 billion people are young people, and 40% of the world population today, is under the age of 25. And recognizing the importance of young people to bring about change, the United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs, UNODA, launched its Youth Outreach Initiative, #Youth for Disarmament in 2019 to engage, educate, and empower young people. Through the practices of opportunity, knowledge, and autonomy, young people are provided the space to meaningfully contribute to the disarmament process and act as the ultimate force for change. So let me share with you the three kind of principles behind Youth for Disarmament initiative. We provide opportunity, and so to speak, that's engage, from producing spotlight stories, conducting training, and connecting with experts and fellow passionate youth leaders like you. UNODA's Youth for Disarmament initiative provide an array of opportunities for young people to meaningfully contribute to progress and disarmament. Second, we provide knowledge. Education is actually a cornerstone of Youth for Disarmament initiative. Youth for Disarmament initiative's dedicated website, online courses, and Open Minds project act as valuable resources for educating young people on issues related to disarmament and ways for them to join the wider Youth for Disarmament community to enact change. The important and positive contribution that young people can make in sustaining peace and security was reaffirmed by the UN General Assembly resolution, Youth, Disarmament, Nonproliferation, and Arms Control, adopted in 2019. The resolution calls upon countries and international organizations to consider developing relevant policies and programs for youth engagement and stresses the importance of education and capacity building of young people in this area. Last but not least, autonomy, empower. Autonomy forms a central practice of UNODA's UN Youth Champions for Disarmament training program, providing individuals the freedom and space for innovation, imagination, and creativity, while providing essential support and resources to turn such ideas into reality. Saloni Shah, an alumna of the CIF, and who is with us today, reflected that for her, it's a miracle that we've avoided another nuclear war after the first use of an atomic bomb 75 years ago. She was writing for UNODA's 75 Words for Disarmament Youth Challenge, which invited young people to express what disarmament means to them and their communities in 75 words. In a winning submission, she wrote that nuclear disarmament is critical since nuclear war is neither winnable nor survivable. On humanitarian grounds, we deserve a peaceful coexistence without a mushroom cloud hanging over us, end quote. The Youth for Disarmament Outreach Initiative was recognized as the best coalition building project of 2020 by the Billion Acts of Peace Award, an activity of the Peace Gem Foundation and 14 Nobel Peace Prize winners. We will continue to build fruitful coalitions to empower young people to make their contributions to disarmament and sustaining peace as national and world citizens. I'm confident that through their dedication and engagement, youth leaders will bring forward new concepts and innovative ideas and approaches that will help us to secure our common future. On this positive note, I would like to introduce 3 UN Youth Champions for Disarmament who will share their thoughts and perspectives on disarmament, their experience with the training program, and ideas for fellow young people to further engage in disarmament issues. Christelle Barakat is from Lebanon, and she is currently pursuing a master's degree in peace and conflict studies at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, as a Fulbright student. Dylan Eski Koç is also a Fulbright student from Turkey, and she's currently pursuing a master's degree in global affairs at Yale University. Kirsty Mosi is from Canada, and she's studying political science at the University of Waterloo. Currently, Kirsten is on a work placement as a research intern with Project Plowshares, a peace and security research organization based in Waterloo, Canada. Dylan, would you like to kick us off by sharing where your interests in disarmament lie and how you got involved in this issue. Over to you, Dylan.
Thank you so much, Sue, for the introduction, and thank you so much, everyone, for being here. It's a pleasure to see all of you. So my interest in disarmament started with an academic interest, actually. During my undergraduate studies, I was working for a project focusing on how to satisfy the growing nuclear energy demand without enabling proliferation. So this project introduced me to the field of nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament. And later, thanks to the UN Youth Champions4Disarmament program, I had a chance to learn more about the global disarmament regime and non-proliferation issues in more detail. And I was able to incorporate these issues into my graduate research at Yale. So currently I'm working on nuclear security, nuclear policy, and counter-proliferation policy. And I'm hoping to continue working on these fields in my future career as well. So I would like to give the floor to Christelle. And could you tell us about how you get started in involvement?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, thank you so much, Dylan. So my interest really in disarmament goes back to my undergraduate studies. I majored in political science and international affairs with minors in gender studies, legal studies, and conflict analysis and resolution. And as I was progressing through my degree and through my classes, even though I did not have one particular class related to disarmament, disarmament and the dangers that weapons pose in the world was brought up numerous times, and it really spiked my interest. I am particularly interested in the linkages between disarmament and other fields, but especially with the peace and conflict studies field, because I believe that if we do not have peace, then we cannot reach the sustainable development goals that the UN has set forth back in 2015. And so in order to reach that peace that will lead us to sustainable development, we need a world that is free of weapons. And for this, dialogue is very important. So this is really from where I got my passion for this field. And as I became a youth champion for disarmament, this has intensified, particularly as I listened to stories from the Hibakushas through peace boat events and other guest speakers. And I have the pleasure to turn over the conversation to Kirsten. So Kirsten, what brought you into this field?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my experience is perhaps a bit more hands-on and a little out of the box. I first got interested in disarmament when I was about 18. I volunteered in a refugee camp on the island of Lesvos, Greece. This is in 2016, so a very, very tough time for the islands and for refugees in general. Of course, that refugee crisis is still going on. But after I left, I came back to Canada and just really felt convinced that this is something I needed to devote my life to. And as I went through my degree, and I'm into my 4th year now, so for the past 3 years, just really interested in the intersection of refugees, forced migration, and disarmament. And I found out about this opportunity and just felt really compelled, exactly as the video that Sue shared explains, that, you know, you can't have any sort of development, any sort of stability when there's the presence of weapons in a community, and especially the threat of nuclear weapons for global security and stability. So that's really, my interest, and I'm currently working as a research intern on exactly that, where I get to spend hours every day, many hours, looking at the connection between forced migration and disarmament, and just, you know, advocating for more holistic policy. And yeah, it's great. And we're going to kind of go through some questions here. So I'm going to pose the first question, and we'll take turn answering and hopefully have a bit of a conversation about this. So I'll ask this to Christelle first, and just what do you feel are the big focuses in disarmament right now? And can you tell us a bit about that?
Sure, thank you so much for asking this. So as I previously just mentioned, disarmament really directly links to reaching a peaceful world without conflict, in which sustainable development initiatives can take place. A lot of countries may be able to start some initiatives geared towards development. However, if we do not have a world that is free of arms and in which the threat of weapons does not exist, then these projects may not be sustainable and long-lasting well into the future. It is also key for achieving the Security Council's mission and vision of international peace and security. So currently, we are 100 seconds to midnight, according to the doomsday clock, which was set forth by the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists. And 2 days ago, actually, on Wednesday, they mentioned that the clock for this year, for 2021, is still stuck at 100 seconds to midnight, calling it a historical wake-up call. It is indeed a wake-up call because more awareness and efforts are needed for us to avoid a nuclear disaster. And this translates into a need for more diplomacy, calmness, and temperance in handling tensions, particularly from the heads of states. And this really makes me echo what Ms. Suzuka had mentioned about the heads of states in Japan. And so we are also living in the era of technological advancements, and a lot of these have improved people's lives, but at the same time, these advancements have made it easier than ever to steal people's lives. So generally speaking, international humanitarian law emphasizes the need to discriminate between civilians and armed individuals within conflicts. It also stresses on the principle of proportionality and the non-targeting of dual-use objects. However, the Geneva Conventions and their protocols were drafted in a pre-lethal autonomous weapons world. So nowadays, the damage that could be incurred from these advanced weapons is more than we can imagine. And as we progress through 2021, we remember that it has been more than 75 years since the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And as days, months, and years go by, hibakusha are becoming older and older, which is very worrisome because their wisdom and their ability to engage in storytelling is gradually becoming less and less. So far, they have acted as the biggest gatekeepers against the occurrence of nuclear avalanches. So it is now more than ever up to all of us, to you, to me, to preserve their legacy and to ensure that they are not forgotten. We owe it to them and to their sacrifices to guarantee that no one has to go through what they experienced. And so I would like to turn it over back to you, Kirsten.
Yeah, no, I think you brought up some really great points, and just jumping kind of on about the hibakusha. I think one of the huge issues in disarmament right now, and that people are kind of coming around to it more, is how it affects individuals. Of course, the hibakusha are our biggest example of that, of just full lives lived, of course, marked by this one event. But we can look at disarmament in its many different forms, and arms proliferation in its many different forms, and just look at how it can make an impact in the lives of individuals. An example I always think of is small arms and light weapons. Of course, again, as the video that Sue showed us said, the presence of weapons isn't necessarily going to create violence, but the fact is that there's a direct link between presence of weapons in communities and, for example, kids and girls' access to education. And when you look at the money spent in those communities or money spent around the world, you can really see a link where we're not prioritizing, kids' education, kids' access to opportunities, and we're focusing on weapons. And that's a huge thing. You think about those individuals and what they're missing out on. And you look again to other things like explosive weapons in populated areas, which is often also called a WIPA. And you see that this is a huge issue in conflict zones, that, you know, people who are not involved in the conflict are being targeted, and that creates a whole host of problems. I think that's really important to look at, that we're facing the biggest refugee crisis we've ever faced, huge famines in places like Yemen, of course, COVID, and the fact that people could be uprooted from their homes and their lives by a weapon is also onto that. So thinking about those individuals. And I think lastly, exactly as Ariel was talking about with her research on the environmental impacts of nuclear weapons and looking at indigenous communities, that's a huge issue as well, that if we're looking at how disarmament connects to the environment field, that is a massive one, because if we're talking about nuclear weapons, that's destruction of all life, of everything on Earth, including our environment, and trying to protect that and tying in those movements, I think, is also a big deal. And that just ties into the fact that disarmament is no longer a field that is siloed, or that you can even afford to be siloed. It needs to connect to other fields. I think there's a really big growing tendency towards that in the field in general. Dylan, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
I would like to echo both Christelle and Kirsten and add 2 quick points. One of them is the emerging technologies and responsible innovation in the field of disarmament and nuclear disarmament. Emerging technologies have developed arms and weaponization significantly, and the absence of international control over these weapons is posing a great challenge to the current disarmament and non-proliferation regime. And some of the challenges could be who uses these weapons and for what purpose, and what would happen if non-state actors get reach of these weapons. How can we control these, you know? And the question is, how can we help? And I would like to shout out to Ariel here, because you mentioned, you know, like these sciences, engineering kind of topics and their involvement in disarmament. And I think we would like to say here that it's very much involved, because we need preemptive action, having people in the decision-making process who understand these weapons, their technologies and capabilities. So we need young people, scientists, engineers, and policymakers who work on those emerging technologies together, who can understand these weapons and will work for the goal of responsible innovation. And as youth champions, we think that this could be an entry point to disarmament advocacy for young people, the STEM students, engineers, instead of being another barrier. And the second point is a more positive one. A lot of people already mentioned, but one of the biggest issues and good news in disarmament is that TPNW entered into force just a week ago, with 52 countries ratifying it, and with a further 86 countries signing it, will make nuclear weapons illegal in the countries that sign it. And it is extremely good news and big development, as even there are nuclear power states who have not joined the treaty yet, but thanks to this treaty, we can expect companies to stop producing nuclear weapons, hopefully, and investing less in nuclear power producing countries and companies. And with that positive note, I would like to talk more about our program at the UNODA. And I would like to start with Kirsten. Could you tell us about what has the UNODA training program consisted of, and how it helped you learn more about these pressing issues that we talked about?
Yeah, for sure. So exactly as we all just mentioned, there's a whole host of issues that comes up as soon as you start talking about disarmament, and our training program has been exactly looking into those issues. And I will say this is one way that I think COVID didn't necessarily benefit it, but we've had the lovely added benefit of having months of training, which I don't think was originally part of the plan. It was supposed to be a much shorter training period. So we've been taking online courses with the ODA platform. They have a training forum. So these courses teach us about a bunch of treaties, bans, different topics that I personally had no knowledge about prior. And then we would join in for monthly learning sessions from different experts from ODA, but also from different UN departments. And then recently we've talked to civil society members, people who are working on these issues as well, and just really learning from them. And I will say, I think my favorite part of the program is the fact that we're all from different parts of the world. There's 10 of us, and everyone has unique experiences and backgrounds, and we learn a lot about the issues that are going around the world just from each other and talking about it. And that has been an unbelievable benefit that I don't think we necessarily expected. And Dylan, please, feel free to elaborate on that.
Continuing with that point, I want to talk a bit more about the champions, the 10 of us. And we all have different reasons why we care about disarmament. Like, we have engineers who work on the emerging technology and responsible innovation part. We have people who look at from more like an economics and sustainable development perspective. But what we agree upon is that, like, we realize that in addition to the importance and urgency of the disarmament issue in its essence, disarmament is a prerequisite to international peace and security, sustainable development, gender equality, and many other things. And we all believe strongly that each one of us, and we see ourselves as global citizens, have interest in and responsibility for working towards disarmament goals to strengthen the global disarmament regime, the norms that are so vital to international peace and security and sustainable development. And we also strongly think that we cannot have any kind of development or peace without secure communities. And we believe that through responsible and effective education and advocacy, such as the Youth Champions Initiative, we can build the next generation of policy leaders and advocates, and make sure that even a small community of people with policy power in their hands have this issue as a very central part in their life. This is why I think it is crucial that our group exists, and hopefully will continue to exist with new and younger generations. And because we believe that youth effective and informed involvement in disarmament and non-proliferation is extremely necessary and crucial to tackle these issues. And this is, I think, this very webinar, this very meeting is extremely important, because youth engaging with the youth, which is, I think, very unique and important in terms of tackling these issues. And back to you, Christelle.
Thank you so much, Dylan. Yes, I definitely echo what you and Kirsten have mentioned. And to me, when I think about our program, the Youth Champions for Disarmament, what comes to my mind is really youth, but also regional diversity that was actually built into the program from the very beginning, because the program actually searched for the 10 of us who came from different regions around the world. And so UNODA staff themselves also come from different regions, have different cultures and different countries. And I believe that this diversity has really allowed us to broaden our perspectives about the world, and it has introduced us to existing challenges and issues related to disarmament in all corners of the world. So it has allowed us to remain seized of the regional obstacles. It also enabled us to think outside of the box and to collaborate on different projects and initiatives. And I believe that this has increased our impact now and moving into the future and our outlook towards the world. Now, some of my favorite parts of the program were really receiving this continued mentorship from the UNODA staff and also all of our guest speakers that we have had the chance to hear from and to ask questions to. And these special guest speaker series are still a continuous process. I also very much love launching the 75 Words for Disarmament competition and being part of this, of the jury on it. And it's truly an honor and a privilege to be able to represent UNODA and my country at events like this one, which really allow youth to become more aware of disarmament and how they can also be part of the change towards a world without weapons. I think one of the main takeaways is the dialoguing through differences, which has really been a big tenet of our interpersonal relationships as youth champions. And so having said this, I would like to steer the conversation towards our roles. So Dylan, I would like to actually ask you, what role do you see for yourself making a difference in your community on issues of disarmament, arms control, and non-proliferation?
Thank you, Christelle. I'm hoping that following my graduate studies, I'm hoping to join the policy and advocacy field in an international organization that works to strengthen the global disarmament regime. And my specific focus would be on nuclear and counter-proliferation policy and work with decision makers to make better policies in the nuclear disarmament field and hopefully move closer to the ultimate goal of global non-proliferation and disarmament in my lifetime. And one additional thing that I would like to work on is include Middle East more in the discussion, because I think nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament in Middle East carries special importance, considering there's always an already conflict going on in these places, and a threat of nuclear security or nuclear terrorism would cause catastrophes in the region. So that's one of my goals, to include the Middle East in the discussion more during my career. What about you, Christelle?
Thank you, Dylan. That sounds wonderful. And I really hope that you are able to carry all of these very inspiring plans and projects. So for me, I feel that after having acquired all of this knowledge about disarmament, first and foremost, I think that I have a duty to spread this knowledge to others around me and to my community in order to combat misinformation, because there is a lot of misinformation or lack of knowledge about disarmament and the need for disarmament. I think we need to work on getting everyone to believe in the necessity of giving up their own weapons, and that this will take time and patience because different societies have different cultures, and this also translates in a lot of times on working to change mindsets, particularly in the case of my country, which is Lebanon, but also in the US, which is currently my host community, I would say. And there has recently been an increased interest in disarmament from the population in Lebanon. So this has really renewed my passion and filled me with a lot of hope towards us reaching a more peaceful and weapons-free world. It is a good sign, but we need to capitalize on small openings like this one. I see myself really playing numerous roles as a trainer, as a facilitator, as an advocate, as a project director and coordinator. I think that really a combination of these roles would allow me to have the best intended impact, because I firmly believe that in our lives, we need to be ready to play any role that might be necessary towards reaching our desired change. And in this case, it's really reaching a world that is free of weapons. So Kirsten, what about you?
Yeah, oh, that's so great. I love hearing what you guys are interested in, what you're doing. When I think of it, I feel like I have a very loose idea of it. Honestly, the word advocacy just comes to mind, of just being an advocate for people and being an advocate for something that I think a lot of people say is really unreasonable. When you talk about complete disarmament, people say that's ridiculous. You can't imagine that would ever happen. You talk about abolishing nuclear weapons, they say that'll never happen in your lifetime. And again, I think back to the framers of the United Nations and what they thought was possible, and whether or not they thought it was possible to have a ban on such weapons they didn't even know existed, I think is a really great measure of what is possible in our generation. I think we are a generation that can abolish nuclear weapons. I think we're a generation that can take things like this current refugee crisis and end it. When you look at the wealth that the world has and the lack that some people have, it's astounding. And I think I clearly get very passionate about it, but seeing that and just advocating for those sorts of things is definitely a role I see for myself. And again, not to speak too much to my own country, but here in Canada, we, for any Americans on the call, we're an easy comparison to, the big brother country. We look at our sibling country, our neighbor country, and it's really easy to compare and say what things are happening down there and what things are happening here, and to say, well, we don't have the same issues with maybe gun violence, but we have a lot of things to work on. I really, really love being able to talk with Canadians about that and to share the ways that we can be doing more, and to not live in this bubble of our Canadian paradise, because it's not true. There's lovely things about my country, I absolutely adore it, but there's a lot of things that we could be doing, and I think that's true for every country in the world. So just really being an advocate for it. When I talk about it, I think there's people who need people to speak up for these issues, and we can't really just let them go by the wayside anymore. And that's absolutely the role I see myself taking on, and I think that we all can take on. I think that's a really great segue just into our last question. And of course, this is kind of the whole point of Youth for Disarmament, is getting more young people involved in disarmament. So that's the question I want to pose back to you, Christelle, first, but all of us will talk about it. Just how can young people get involved in issues of disarmament, including nuclear disarmament, which is kind of the big focus, of course, in the last few days.
Thank you, Kirsten. I would like to start off by saying that around a month ago, as I was walking through downtown, I saw some writing in the street. It was more like art, and it related to the Black Lives Matter movement. It said, "Not knowing is bad, not wishing to know is worse." And I would like to add to it that knowing and not doing anything is probably the worst. So now today, at the very least, all of you on this call will have learned a bit more, hopefully, about disarmament. So you have really a duty after this conference that we are in to go and research and learn more about this field and the different areas that it encompasses. And this is actually my first advice as a peace and conflict student and practitioner. We cannot address something without knowing what it exactly means. Sometimes we think that we know what disarmament is, but fact is it's such a big umbrella term for a lot of different areas, such as gun violence, landmines, nuclear weapons, and so many more. After you gain this insight into the different areas of disarmament and what really pulls at you or what you feel you are interested in working on, then you should try to map out the context. So go and examine your own country and your own community. What are the main areas of disarmament that your country needs to focus on? What are the current initiatives taking place? What is the broader stance of the community regarding disarmament? Does it advocate for disarmament? Maybe the community would like to still keep its weapons for a certain cause. You need to understand the psychology behind it if we are to work on changing mindsets. What are the downfalls of current disarmament efforts? Maybe there are some initiatives, but there are some challenges that they are facing. What are maybe some allies or entry points or ways that you could better or enhance current initiatives? So we need to ask ourselves all of these questions. And then we need to think, do we need to focus on changing traditional mentalities? And once you really have an answer to these questions, once you have done all of this societal mapping, then we can try to think of ways to connect with others who are already working on disarmament in order to magnify, amplify, and multiply their work. We should also then, as youth, all of us and all of you on the call, write down our own skills and our own resources that we have at our disposal. Maybe you might be great at video making or at writing or at mobilizing others. We all have different skills. And once we know what skills we have, then we are able to see what projects we might be most efficient at doing and what other skills we need from others in order to reach our intended impact. Last but not least, I really encourage you to go through the UN publications. So there are a lot of wonderful publications out there by UNODA and other UN bodies. So my personal favorite, for instance, is The Lazy Person's Guide to Saving the World, which relates mostly to sustainable development goals. And it is segmented into 4 core areas. And it talks about how you can change the world even from the comfort of your own couch or your own home or your own workplace. Another interesting UNODA publication is Actions4Disarmament. So 10 things you can do. And it focuses on the different actions that youth can take for all of us to reach a weapons-free world. And these include staying informed, starting a club, facilitating a discussion, expressing yourself, hosting a film screening, voicing your concern, creating an event, signing up, planning a presentation, and reaching out. I really believe that no matter how small the action that we take is, actions have a way of adding up on top of each other and of creating a chain effect of impacts around us. So we need to believe in ourselves and to really go ahead with this journey. What about you, Kirsten? What are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, I think you covered it wonderfully. And I think obviously everyone on this call is already taking a lot of steps and, compared to the general public is very involved. And I think that's incredible. I wish I'd known a lot more about this when I was in high school, when I was, going through my original study. It's only something I've looked into obviously in the past few years. So I think that's huge. And the only thing I think I would add to that is just find out what you're passionate about. And I guarantee disarmament has a connection to it. I think, we do our best work as people, but especially as young people, we do our best work when we're passionate about it, we're involved in it. And there's always a way to connect it, whether that's through art or music or different intersections like the environment movement, like education, like there are so many ways to get involved. So I think don't discount yourself. Don't think that there's not a space for you, because there absolutely is. And my own experience with that is that when I applied to this program, I very much was like, oh, that's just, it's definitely not, I'm not going to get it. I'm just going to apply, see what happens. And I think it's been a really true testament to the fact that you can't count yourself out, and you really have to put yourself up for opportunities, because you never know where they'll lead. And this has been a huge testament to that. So yeah, there's always space, there's more room, and there's always going to be more room in the disarmament community. Back to you, Dylan.
Thank you so much. So I would like to end with a general note. I think one of the most challenging barriers in youth involvement in disarmament is the understanding of disarmament, because disarmament engagement is kind of strong on the national level, dealing with the governments, but it's relatively weak on the individual level, and it seems like possibly getting weaker. Because when we talk about disarmament and non-proliferation, especially young people tend to think that this has nothing to do with me, unlike the climate change or social injustice issues. So there's a tendency to think that this is such a big issue that should be only dealt by the government and decision makers. However, as we said a lot of times during this conference, we believe this is not the case. We believe that you do not have to be a diplomat or a political scientist to be a part of the disarmament regime. Whoever you are and wherever you are, you can contribute to our common future, because it affects every one of us and we can all contribute to it. And also, disarmament can only be effective if it properly engages with everyone. So I think the solution starts with a change in understanding of these issues and realizing that each and every one of us can contribute to the disarmament regime, regardless of how old we are, where we are from, or our occupations. So with that note, this is end of our speech and discussion, and we would love to hear from you any comments or questions that you would like to ask us. Thank you so much for having us here.
Great. Thank you so much. That was so inspiring and encouraging. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and your thoughts. And yeah, we have a little bit of time. Actually, we will make a little bit of time for the Q&A. So do you have any? First, I would like to ask students, if you have a question, please raise your hand. You can raise your hand using the, this reaction, like a, virtual hand, or you can just speak up, or you can type your question in the chat box. Are there any question? I actually had one, I received one question via email. One question from Soka High School students, Takashi Watanabe. Watanabe-kun, would you like to ask your question?
Okay. Yeah, I have a one question. So I'd like to after eradicating the nuclear weapons, how can countries secure that how can country secure their securities? So I'd like to about it. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, who wants to take that question? Okay, Christel, please.
Thank you so much for your question. And yes, it does make a lot of sense. I believe this goes back really to rebuilding trust among nations in the international system. And it goes back to diplomacy and building good diplomatic ties. There are currently more than 26 or 29 nations, I believe, who do not actually have any armies. These include, for example, Haiti, Costa Rica, Micronesia, and all of these countries have relinquished their armies in order to reroute their funds towards development initiatives. And they have been known to have peace for a very long time. So this is just an example that one can even, or a country can even exist without an army and still manage to remain at peace with its neighbors if it intends to do so. So I personally believe that if nuclear weapons are abolished, we will go back to relying on traditional diplomacy and trust building, on countries really helping each other within the international system. And this is actually goes back to the foundation and to the purpose of the UN, to act as a platform to ease collaborations between countries and to enable them to raise each other up instead of standing against each other. So this is just my personal opinion and from my background in political science, but perhaps my colleagues would like to add something onto what I just said.
Yeah, I think I can jump in really quick and just say, I think one of the biggest things I've learned from being a political science student is that the way our world is ordered currently is relatively new in the history of the world. The way things are done, you could probably say for the last 75 years since, we've had the United Nations and since we've been in this post-World War II era. And that absolutely means that there's so many other ways that we can do globalized diplomacy, working together as countries. And I think that's a really exciting realization that the way things are is not the way they have to be and is certainly not the way they've always been. So, there's a bit of room for imagination there, and that's a really exciting point, but also learning a lot about other countries and the way they connect with each other in treaties and the way that countries already have such connections with one another and almost allies and established relationships is a really important part of that.
Thank you. The good question and great answer. Thank you. Are there any questions? Students, alumni, or teacher, or whoever wants to ask any question, don't be shy. Oh, please, Claudia.
Thank you very much, Masako. I would like to ask a question. How ODA can further contribute to the disarmament efforts and work that it's made right now by young generations? I like very much the presentation from Sue, but I would be very interested in knowing how can we as UNODA further contribute to your efforts and to your work? Thank you.
Oh, that's a question for us?
Yeah, for all of the young people that are here. Yeah, it's an open question.
Open question for me?
If you want to answer, of course, Masako.
No, I'm just... Yeah, please, let's wait for the youth champions or anyone.
One thing I was thinking about is that, I think touching base with the universities in almost every country, especially like the public policy programs or international relations programs, like having kind of a student club or having regular webinars on conferences, something like that would be super efficient, because like I'm in a graduate school in the US and I can see that not a lot of people know about disarmament or even nuclear weapons. And when they see me talking about these things, I get this reaction like, this has supposed to be in the Cold War. Like, why are you still interested in this? Like, it's just like, they don't understand it's still like importance and urgency. So what I was thinking was that we could do this through youth champions. Like, I would really like to start a student club or some initiative at Yale, for example, starting with Yale and then expanding it to other policy schools in the US and in the other countries, I think would have really a lot of impact in the field, because these people will go to the governments in their countries or like international organizations, so they will have policy powers. So I think it's really important that even if they don't work specifically on disarmament or nuclear non-proliferation, even if they work on environmental policy, I think it's really important that they have an idea of what's going on in this field and its urgency and importance.
Thank you, Dylan.
Anyone else would like to address that question? Yeah.
I love, honestly, if, and this has started, the work for this has started through the Youth for Disarmament initiative, but I think it would be wonderful to have maybe not a repository, but like a world map with different youth from different countries being able to put a pin on their country and to mention the disarmament initiative that they have, that it's currently ongoing, perhaps. And this way, like, it would serve as a linkage between youth within their own countries, like to know what other youth are doing, and potentially also between youth from different countries. I have seen this done in different like massive open online courses just for people to say which country they are from, but I think it might be a nice idea to implement in order to know all of the potential projects related to disarmament that are happening, particularly from youth, so that they can also connect with each other.
Great, thank you. Let's take maybe one more question. I know we are getting a little bit longer than I expected because it's so amazing discussion, so I just do not want to end. So there any question? Someone wants to ask question? Jean, you wanna say something?
Masako,
there is
can I make a quick comment, please?
Sure, please, Jean, please.
Thank you. Well, firstly, I'd like to, I told Masako that I will have to leave earlier, and I still do, but I was so inspired by what I heard here, I decided to stay. So much inspiring stuff here. After a long and stormy week here in California, this is really a befitting way to end our long week. So thank you very much for inspiring this old boomer here. You are the next generation. I mean, I want to comment on this discussion about, I think the question about what ODA can do to support the youth is a really important one. But I think the most important one is what you as the youth can do. I mean, we as the older generation or previous generation or boomers or what you want to call us, we are there to support you. And of course, you know, we all know about the fantastic work that one of your own generation, Greta Thunberg, is doing on the environmental side. Well, who's going to be the Greta Thunberg for nuclear disarmament? And any one of you can do that. And it's a question of being inspiring to your own peers. And that inspires older people. And that leads to action. In any of you can take on world leaders. I have a 16-year-old son. And so I can relate to your passion. And I really want to call on you to do things your way. Don't do things our way. It didn't work for us, all right? Do things your way. We have in our midst, and I apologize to my good friend, Robert Fry. But if you know who Robert Fry is, he's actually in the audience. Mr. Fry is an Emmy Award-winning producer and director of the famous films In My Lifetime and Nuclear Requiem and many, many other documentaries. What you need to do is get the attention of Mr. Fry and make your voices known, right? When I worked at the CTBTO years ago, we had a program where we asked people around the world to make a very short video. I mean, today you have TikTok, and I'm not going to embarrass myself by not knowing all the different kinds of media that you can use. But you can make a few seconds video, and you can create hundreds of these videos and put them together, what you are doing in this field. I remember we had people, and mostly young people from all over the world, putting these collages together. And that message was, stop nuclear testing. And so I encourage you, and I implore you almost, is to take action, not through talking. I'm a diplomat. I've been in diplomacy for more than 30 years. You know what diplomats do? They talk. They talk themselves to death. What the youth does best is that you do. You take action, right? And so I really inspire you. We as educators, as the United Nations, we stand ready to help you, to provide you with the tools, to provide you with the insights and the information. But you have to take action. Whether you take action as activists, whether you write letters, whether you make films, all the ideas that you have here is, but don't wait. Don't wait for others to take the lead. Any one of you in this call, and your teachers with your teachers' guidance and your professors at universities can do that. So I just wanted to say that, Masako, and I'm honored to be part of this call. It really is very inspiring for me.
Thank you. Thank you so much, John. That was so encouraging, and I really appreciate. Yeah, thank you. So actually, I had two questions directly sent to me, and I wanted to briefly address those questions. The first question is from Alicia from Hacker School. What are some informational resources to learn more about the history of disarmament and non-proliferation? How do we educate our own peers in high school who might not know as much about nuclear threats? This is an excellent question. First, I would like to address, visit a Critical Issues Forum website. We posted a lot of educational materials, and also, of course, you have to visit United Nations Disarmament Education website. So, Sue, would you like to talk about resources a little bit to study disarmament?
Yes, thank you, Masako. So we have various websites, and I shared in the chat. So we have the education website. I sent it at 9:26 p.m. If you see that there, I have posted the education website for you to take a look at, and also the Disarmament Education dashboard, where we have this short online courses free of charge. Anybody can take these courses just to self-educate, or you could as teachers and educators, you can introduce that during your class, for your students. And these are some of the courses that our youth champions have taken before they actually attended our webinars. So these are the resources that I would like to suggest. And also the disarmament basic guide, I also posted in the chat. This is a real excellent, basic guide, for all issues related to disarmament. It's available in all 6 UN languages. It's available in Russian. It's not available in Japanese, but I know that Tokyo University Professor Asada, she translated with her students this basic guide into Japanese. So it was available in the Tokyo University's websites, but for those who would like to, follow that, I would be happy to search it and also make it available to you for the Japanese students. And also the 10 things you can do, which was mentioned by Christelle, that publication is available in Japanese and also in English. Yeah, so these are the education resources that I'd like to recommend to you. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Sue. I will post any necessary information on the CIF website and also send email to teachers. So please check it back if you couldn't find it. And I guess this is going to be the last question because we need to end at some point. So my question, this question is from Natalie Gavis. My question is, do you have any advice for advocating for non-proliferation in places where people might fear against it? This is also a wonderful question, and I'm sure that youth champions may have some wisdom to share.
Yeah, I can start us off there. I think that is a huge undertaking, and the first thing is that you're always going to have someone who's going to push back on it. I remember I think it was either on the anniversary of the bombing of Hiroshima or Nagasaki, but sometime this summer I shared something very briefly on my Instagram page on stories like, oh, here's facts about this, and kind of highlighting Canada's involvement in helping test the weapons. And immediately I had someone responding and saying that's not true and that's not going to happen. And it was a good friend of mine. He wasn't upset, but it was just immediately someone wanted to talk about it and wanted to fight back against it. I think that's really good and healthy, and recognizing that you're always going to have someone pushing back, and that's just going to be a part of it. And obviously keeping yourself safe and opening conversations in a safe and healthy way, but recognizing that even having the conversation is good, which I think Christelle was referencing, that it's worse to keep people in the dark about it. It's worse to be ignorant about it. It's better to have conversations even if people don't agree with you, or have good reason not to agree with you. That's just my 2 cents there.
I would just add that you should aim to start from somewhere, anywhere. Just start and try to see who might be your allies that are already existent. If there is like an established NGO, if there is a club on disarmament somewhere or on non-proliferation, or if there isn't something already established, try to see the interest from other people in pursuing such a project. You start from somewhere and then it starts to grow bit by bit. Greta Thunberg, who was just mentioned by Mr. Jean, actually started alone, holding her own sign and not attending school. And then this transformed into a movement all over her country and maybe even all over the world. So we are able to make an impact. We are able to make a change. Even if we start on our own, bit by bit, you will gather other people who are also passionate about the same cause. And maybe it will grow into an international movement. Who knows?
Great. Thank you so much. On that note, I would really like to appreciate everybody for participating in today's amazing event, and especially for those 3 youth champions and alumni, UNODA officials, Sue and Claudia, and everybody who supported this program. And I would just like to quote my favorite passage from the Antonio Guterres's the Agenda for Peace. We look to young people to be the ultimate force for change at the local, national, and international levels to make the world safer and more secure for all. So I really, really inspired by this passage. So each one of you has a very important role to play. And as Christian, I think Christian mentioned that don't discount yourself. You know, everybody has an important role to play. You may think it's too small, but nothing is too small. Maybe it's small, but nothing is too small. So please have a confidence. And I am so encouraged to see so many young people committed to the world free of nuclear weapons. And again, thank you so much for your support from ODA. I always so enjoying working with your office. And so thank you so much. Thank you for everybody. Thank you.